and welcome to another episode of Wind, Waves and Wells with me, Joe, your host for the podcast. And today's episode is part 2 with George Highmoor. The first part was released a wee while back, and I hope you guys took a lot of pleasure out of listening to it. This week's one is a little bit more sinister with regards to one of the stories in it. So I will give the heads up that there is a story of someone being killed in it. But I hope, aside from that, you take a lot from the episode this week. And there's a lot. I enjoyed it, put it that way. So I'm not going to ramble on too much longer. Part 2 with George. George, part 2, Baku, where we left off from the first one. Where do we go?
I think one of the things, as I said earlier on in part 1, was the fact that the countries, let's say Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, they had all been part of the former Soviet Union, and after they broke up, they weren't really too aware of the fact that they were different countries. They had a lot of things to do, like Aeroflot used to, when the breakup actually came, Aeroflot had airplanes in Azerbaijan, and they had airplanes in Turkmenistan, and all these countries kept those airplanes and created their own airlines. And so before the breakup of the Soviet Union, the Aeroflot had more commercial aircraft than the total combination of other aircraft in the entire world. A lot of them weren't serviceable. Some of them, I mean, flying into some of these airfields in the former Soviet Union, there was lines and lines and lines and lines of airplanes which had been sacrificed for spare parts to keep the other ones going, etc. So they hadn't really figured out that so they were still using, those that had them were still using Russian IDs or Russian passports, and so people didn't check. If you landed from an airplane in Ashgabat and you've flown from Baku, nobody would say, can we see your passport? Because for them it was still a commercial, a local flight. It was a domestic.
Soviet Union-esque. Yeah.
On one occasion we got invited to go to Kyog, which was the Kazakhstan International Oil and Gas Exhibition, but it was Kyog 1. It was the first one I'd ever done, and it was held in Almaty. And so we a few aircraft were chartered from all various parts of the world to turn up and make presentations about Western technology to the Kazakhstan oil field. And myself and Bertie, we were in Baku, and we got picked up by a British Airways charter flight to fly to Almaty, as it was then called, which was at that point the capital of Kazakhstan. Stunning place, and but we were staying in what was basically a converted sanatorium. There were other hotels, but where we stayed was in the foothills of the mountains, and it was stunningly beautiful. But every day we would get taken to the exhibition center and do what people do, especially for people who were basically oil rig people, standing around in a stuffy exhibition hall, completely dehydrated from the booze that you had the night before. and eating sandwiches that had curled up at the edge, and having to drink massively sugar saturated fizzy drinks to hydrate was not much fun. But in the evenings we had fun. So we had one occasion. Well, I think we were there for 4 nights. By the way, we emptied the airplane of alcohol on the way down there. So, but
Vodka, I
oh,
take it.
I think the
Strictly
only thing
vodka.
about the airplane had come from Heathrow and from Heathrow to Baku, and when it got to Baku, it was empty. So they restocked it from.
Right. Okay.
So they restocked it to take from Baku to Almaty, and I'm sure that on the way back they stocked it up again. And if I remember rightly,
Yeah.
if I remember rightly, the only alcohol left on board was Bailey's, because
Yeah. Too thick.
oil field hands don't drink
Yeah.
Bailey's. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say it's not enough
Yeah.
alcohol.
So so anyway, we had one particular occasion where after I think this was probably the last night that we were there. Based on the activities of the previous 2 or 3 nights, it was, and which are elaborated upon in my book. But I had to go back to my room and do some things. I had to make a couple of phone calls, and of course it was only landlines, and you had to ring the girl in at the switchboard at the hotel to get her to connect you into a line and all that sort of stuff. So I made my calls, and I went back into the lift. It was one of those lifts where you had a grated door which you had to pull across and blah blah blah. I think I was on the fifth floor. Pressed to the basement, which is where they'd converted into a dining hall / bar, etc. Pressed that button, and to my shock, the lift stopped on the fourth floor, and then the door opened, and I have to say it was the biggest man in my life I'd ever seen. He was about 6 feet 6 tall, 6 foot 7 wide. He had a big ginger beard and a typical Soviet haircut, and he was completely and utterly plastered. He was
Yeah.
he
Perfect.
he stunk of vodka. I hadn't had any drinks at this point, and he staggered in, and it wasn't a particularly big lift anyway, and I felt like he was going to crush me. And then with his great big hands, he tried to press the button to go where he wanted to go, which he eventually did, and managed to shut this door. Um, and then, oh yes, when he was trying to press the button, I had stupidly said in my English accent, "Can I be of assistance, or can I help you?" At which point he turned around and looked at me as if I was sort of like a slug on the floor. And the lift started to go down, and he put his hand in his pocket, inside his jacket, and took out a silver pistol and started shouting "KGB, KGB, KGB," which is KGB, KGB. Of course, at this point, the KGB had been dismantled. And then eventually, thankfully, he was going down to the ground floor, not the basement. And the door opened, and he literally fell out of the lift, realized he had a gun in his hand, put it back in his jacket. And by that point, I would shut the lift and pressed the button and gone down to the basement. And as I walked out, people looked at me and went, "What's happened?" And I was sweating like a pig, and I was pale and feeling like I just escaped death. And I told everybody what it was, and they said, "Oh my God, I'm glad that wasn't blah blah blah." I went back to the bar and started drinking again. And then about an hour later, the lift door opened, and there he was, even more drunk. Went through the crowd of people that were there, looked like he was. Anyway, then he put his hand back inside his pocket, pulled out this silver pistol again, and pointed at the ceiling as he staggered through the room. pulling the trigger, which fortunately for us, it was empty anyway. So he was going tag
Thank
over,
God for
click, click,
that.
click, tab over, click, 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 click. And the only problem was with him was that he was so big and so drunk he couldn't stop.
Mm,
And you know what a basement wall is like? It's actually the earth. Yeah.
yeah,
And so he
yeah.
he
Thick.
he couldn't stop himself, and eventually tried to headbutt the earth. And at
Oh,
which
that's
point
good.
he passed out. And yeah, that's
That's good. At least that calms the beast.
yeah. I mean, but everybody was we had there was a lot of oil field hands, but there were also quite a lot of hostesses
Mm,
from the exhibition companies in the stands and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of screaming and stuff going on. But so that was one amusing story. But one story which is a little more sobering is the story of a guy called Anthony who he and Chewy used to and from my book you'll know who Chewy is. They used to go down of an evening and sit on the it was the River, I think it was called, and drink a few beers and have a little bit of vodka and close the day off and then go back to the apartment and wait for the next day of work. So on this particular Sunday, Anthony and Chewy were sitting there, and these is two. Oh, sorry, but this is in Siberia, by the way, in a place called Nizhnevatovsk. Um,
So you still, so you obviously this was after were you basically, what were you doing now then, obviously, to get to, because you're still working across this, the kind of
yeah,
Eastern Europe,
this
Soviet
to
Union
be honest with you, this is
countries.
more about demonstrating the dangers of traveling around places like Russia and
Yeah.
Africa and the Kyrgyzstans and the Kazakhstans and the dangers of being too lax in your due diligence about trusting
Mm,
people. And there is a section in my book that tells people how I used to approach being in a new place, and it just involved going for a run. But um, so Chewie and Anthony were sitting on the side of the river, and these two Russian guys and two Russian girls walked up to them and heard that they were speaking in English. They were about 18, 19 years old. And so the girls said to Anthony, "Is it okay if we sit and talk to you? We try to learn English in our school, but we've never spoken to an English speaker before." And so they said, "Yes, of course, no problem." And then they shared the beers and shared the vodka with them. And Chewy decided that as the sun was going down, he was going to go back to the apartment. And he said to Anthony, "Come with me. We should go." And Anthony said, "No, I'm going to stay with these people." So Chewy left, and then the two girls left, and so Anthony was left with two Russian guys, I say 18, 19 years old. Um, and they ran out of alcohol. And so one of the Russian guys said that his parents had a bottle of vodka in their apartment. They should go and get it, which they did. Came back and sat again drinking as the sun went down, or was probably already down. And as they got drunker and drunker, one of the elder of the two Russian guys turned around and said that they had to replace the vodka at because their parents would probably want to drink it, blah blah, or knowing Russians probably clean their teeth in it. Um, so
mm,
um, so there was basically they didn't have any money. Anthony didn't have any money, but he had a watch, and they said they wanted the watch to sell to get some vodka, blah blah blah. And a push comes to shove. Literally, there was a scuffle, and this Russian guy, knocked Anthony out. At that point, probably sobered up a little bit. Thought, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And they threw him in the river. And of course, when he hit the river, it was cold, and he came round and was trying to get out of the river. It was very shallow at this point. And unfortunately, the Russian guy decided to go in after him, and he held him down and drowned him and pushed him out into the river. And when Chewie woke up next morning, he realized that Anthony wasn't there, and he searched around for him, and then eventually went to the police. And to be fair, the Russian police were very good. They actually put a picture of Anthony on the local TV channel, and the two girls saw the picture, and they went to the police. And then the police went to the apartment of the guy, and they found the watch, and they confessed. So it's just a sad story about, alcohol, and I drink. I'm not preaching, but alcohol and the
No.
trust of people, no matter how nice they are, they don't necessarily think the same way as you do. But to put an end to the story, both of the Russians confessed, and they were sentenced to 20 years in jail, and
For
for
murder.
murder. And it didn't take very long.
Yeah.
They don't. It wasn't, oh, we'll try you next week, or
No, I
they
don't
didn't
mess
mess
about.
about. And
No.
just a note on a Russian Siberian prison is that basically what they did is they built a prison, put machine gun posts around the perimeter, and provided them with electricity and heat and water and food, and that was it. The prisoners ran the prison themselves. So
Hmm.
how on
Not somewhere you want to be locked up for 20 years,
not
really, is it?
not a place you want to go in for 20 minutes when you're 18-year-old.
No.
I
No,
think
no,
I think
definitely not.
I think you're getting the gist of what their little
Yeah.
lives were going to be like after that. So
It's because I've thought about this a few times, and some of your stories actually, obviously there's quite a lot of stories which are alcohol related. How big a thing? I mean, how much of a drinking culture was there in the industry in that kind of era? Because now, obviously, it's a big no-no. There's a lot of alcohol testing and drug. I don't know how much they still do it now. But back then, I mean, was there a huge alcohol kind of culture within the industry?
it was party
Yeah.
time, it was party time,
Yeah.
and we were, you know, I wouldn't say we were rich, but we were well off.
Yeah.
There was never we let's stay behind and save some money tonight. Um,
Yeah.
and certainly if you go back to the time in Port Harcourt, living in a staff house, there was every evening was darts, pool, beer, and a movie, and we had the biggest beer fridge in the world. Um, and then,
Yeah.
yes,
It was almost just part of the day-to-day kind of. It wasn't normalized, so to speak, was it? In some way, it wasn't
yeah,
really.
also slightly fatalistic as well, in terms of,
Yeah.
uh, what was it? Live today, for tomorrow you might die. Um, and
Yeah.
again, yes, I mean there was culture of the of alcohol, certainly not on a rig. Although if you went to a French rig back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, if you went to a French rig, you had red wine with your dinner, and that's offshore as
Mm.
well as onshore.
Yeah.
So yes, it was there all the time, but not if you're working. No, I mean
No.
everybody knew that that you had to. I mean, rigs are dangerous places.
Hmm.
So
So I mean now, so with Siberia, Eastern Europe, and now you're in this sales role, um, mainly. I mean, where are you going your travels after that kind of era? I mean, when does it start? When do you start slowing down, so to speak?
well, from my perspective, the stands went on for a couple of years or so, and then we started looking
Yeah.
at. And the Siberia story is just a sideshow as far as I'm concerned. it was just to demonstrate
Yeah.
the culture. Um,
No,
and
100%.
then we started with a slightly different group of people. We went to places like Poland and Croatia and Romania and Bulgaria and Hungary, and we used to just go and see the national oil companies and try and instill a little bit of more urgency in getting the wells drilled. And if we needed
Mm.
to, we'd go on the rig and demonstrate stuff. Um, and the old a quick story about visiting a rig in Kazakhstan in the Karachaganak field. Um, I asked the drilling supervisor, the company man, on a land rig, um, what was the first thing they did when they got to the site, and he said plant vegetables. Um, and then I said that, and
Fair
then I
enough.
said, what depth are you at? And he said, this is the deep condensate field, about 4,000 meters, and he was at 3,900 feet. And I said, well, when do you expect to reach TD? And this was in May, and he said, oh, he didn't say it in my English accent, but basically he said they were at 3,950 meters. And had 50 meters to go in May, and I said, "Well, when do you think you're going to get to TD?" And he said, "Probably September." And I said to him, I said, I'm not trying to be rude or cynical. I said, this is all through a translator. And I said, I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
clever or cynical. I said, but isn't that quite a long time? And he said, yes, it is. He said, but we're not going to get the casing till January anyway.
Then you just drag out the drill. Just keep drilling with Milwaukee.
It was almost like saying, yeah, well, yes, it's good slow, but the potatoes won't be ready till October.
Yeah. So there's no point
No,
in rushing.
no.
Are you allowed to say who you're working for at the time, or not?
This was all with Sperry Sun.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
still with
I mean,
Spurs.
it
Yeah.
involved a lot of other people. We had Sperry Sun was bought by Dresser Industries, and Dresser Industries owned Baroid and NL Baroid and uh, Diamond Bought. No, not Diamond Bought. They had a bit company and that sort of stuff. And my time with Sperry Sun came to a close when eventually Halliburton and Dresser merged together.
Yeah.
So
And then, and then, but when do you carry on? Obviously, doing the similar role when you leave Sperry Sun or Dresser Sun.
uh, no, I
No.
again my career is in two parts. My part is
Yeah.
offshore, onshore, uh, oil and gas drilling, and then when I left Halliburton left me, to be honest with you. Um, when that
Mm,
happened, uh, I was unemployed for a year, and then I went
right.
to work. I was headhunted by some guys who had a consultancy, a drilling consultancy company, which
Right.
which needed some help, and I had the management experience. But more importantly, I started working with a lot of drilling people who, even though I'm not particularly qualified to do a lot of the things that they were doing, I'd been there, done that,
Yeah.
seen it, knew where they were going to go, knew what they did for a living, and so uh, gained a lot of respect and grew the company very, very quickly.
Right. And then, do you still continue your travels when you're with them, or were you kind of positioned and stuck in one
It
place
was
there?
based in Norwich, in the UK, and I did travel, but mostly it was to go and see people in the Far East, to be honest with you. So I spent quite a lot of
Right.
time in Thailand, Vietnam, uh, KL, all places where there were people that I knew who might be able to use the company to help them plan or execute their wells.
Of all the time you've been offshore and traveling, what place still sticks with you and still sticks out the most now?
From what respect do you think?
Just a life, just you sometimes you find yourself reflecting on it. I mean, how your total career spans how long from start to in the oil industry?
40 years, I guess.
And then what do you think stuck with you the most of all those places
Well,
you've been?
obviously Nigeria is going to be the one I say because so much happened and
Yeah,
it was so character forming. It made me realize how fragile life is. It made me realize how important it is to mitigate your risks. I'm not a risk
yeah,
taker, but if I have to take risks, then you need to mitigate them. Um, and so always looking for an exit, always looking for a safe way out of whatever happens, sitting near the door, whether it be in a room or a helicopter, um, making sure you know where the life jackets are, um, making sure you know where the emergency exits are, where the fire extinguisher is, and all that sort of stuff. Um, and I guess, I mean, I guess from the point of view of me, there's a phrase that I can't remember who said it, but it was um, a, uh, a coward dies 1,000 times, a hero dies but once.
it's a good one
Yes,
though.
it's very good. It's very good, and I guess I'm one of the cowards that turned into a hero because I'm still alive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, fair enough. How much I mean the culture because when I read the book and I see some of the stories and I can remember growing up as a kid just around the oil industry in general. Um, how much has the culture changed from when you kind of went into it till when you left it?
Massively. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna
when I
say.
first started
I
going
was gonna say
offshore,
that.
I didn't work that much in the North Sea, but I did Southern North Sea Dutch sector, and I did a couple of trips to Thistle Alpha, and
Oof.
we didn't even survive. When I certainly in the Dutch sector, in fact, yeah, in the Dutch sector, all the times I went offshore, I didn't even wear a survival suit
No.
in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
And there's a story about
Did you stick a life jacket on? Pretty much.
only if something went wrong, probably.
Oh, really? There was no life jacket even
Oh,
in
it
there. You
probably
just
would have
kind
been
of,
one somewhere. But but
yeah. You weren't shown it.
no, I don't think we've. I don't, this is, uh, I mean, for going offshore and for Holland, you'd go offshore from either Schiphol East or Schiphol Oost, or you go from
Okay.
Den Helder, um, and
Yeah.
you used to have to watch a safety video, I think. But certainly, I don't recall ever in the Dutch sector ever wearing a survival suit. And I'm sure there were life jackets there, but I think most people know that, or certainly my impression is that life jackets on helicopters were pretty useless. You know.
Yeah. Once you're going
Yeah.
down anyway. Yeah. I know what you mean. What was safety a thing at
Well,
all?
again, it was HSE didn't really exist back in the late 70s, I don't think. And HSE was if it did exist in those days, it was all about manufacturing and factories and foundries and places. I mean, but offshore, um, health and safety was definitely a concern, but I don't think again you would ever have an HSE supervisor, advisor, manager on the rig. It was always up to the
Mm.
company man or the drilling supervisor to make sure that everything. But one thing I will say about working offshore, certainly from my perspective, is that every time I've arrived at a rig, whether it be a land rig or a swamp barge or semi-sub or jack up, whatever, we never had a culture of that's not my job. It was always, can I help? How can we do it safely? But it was just wasn't just about safety. It was also about economically or as fast as possible, and economically and as fast as possible do not go hand in hand with safety. So, but yeah, I mean, but again, we used to. I can remember in the South China Sea being on a jack up, and there's the heli deck was literally covered with half naked men getting a suntan. When the barge master would come up and shout, "Is it okay if we can borrow our helipad for
for 5 minutes?" It's funny, is it? Oh shit!
Oh, we got the problem. It's reconnecting.
And I actually that cut off, unfortunately, due to the good old technology of this era. But it was coming towards an end anyway, so it kind of fitted in quite well. I do hope you enjoyed that one because, like I say, yeah, it was a little bit more sinister this week. But nonetheless, it kind of does show you the brutal reality that this industry potentially still is. I don't know so much about the darker side of it as nowadays. A couple of experiences in my own time showed that there is a little bit of hostility still within the industry, but nonetheless, another episode which I hope you took a lot from, and the realities of it all is this is also in his book, which I once again will highly recommend. I'm not doing his promoting for him, but I am saying I did find it an easy read, and I did think it was very good. So if you are able to, I do highly recommend it. Along with that, you can also share, like, subscribe, and do all those good things when you get the chance. It helps the podcast, and it certainly helps me find more people as well. And that goes out to those listening. If you are keen in it, or maybe even interested in coming on, please do. I would really like to speak to you. Everyone has a story, even though most people say no one wants to hear my voice. That's a lie, because no one knows. So, another one in the hopper. See you on the next one, where we go again. Ciao.